Cool. Hi everyone, thanks for coming down to the first panel run by Orchard. My name is Grace Heywood and I work at Resident Advisor. I used to work at Wire in Leeds. I'm joined by Iyesha from Rap Party, Kitty Bartlett from Percolate and Risen, and Sean from Keep Hush. Guys, do you want to start by giving a brief intro?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. My name's Naomi. I also go by Iyesha, it's my DJ name. I run Rap Party with two of my friends, and we are a queer collective. We prioritise queer people of colour, people who are gender diverse, and sex workers. We throw free parties, and we just recently started throwing club nights.
Nice. My name's Kitty Bartlett. I DJ under Kimia. I don't even know how you actually pronounce it. I run Bloom, which is based in Manchester, and then also work for Percolate in London, and recently founded Risen with another person, which is a new festival based in London that supports and pushes women, non-binary and trans people, not just DJs, but also from all the aspects behind the scenes in like the events industry.
I'm Sean and I work for Keep Hush, which is an underground music platform. I work as the head of events and programming there, so looking after our like live streams, club nights, and brand partnership events. Yeah, that's me.
Can you tell us a bit more about Keep Hush and what it is and what it stands for?
Yeah, it actually started as a blog like 8 years ago now, and then more recently in the last 5 years started running live streams in London, sort of weekly live stream parties, platforming underground music, and since then it's sort of built bigger and bigger, and we've been doing club nights now, trying to get brands to like meaningfully invest in underground dance music, and yeah, just generally trying to push underground artists with our platform.
Nice. So I guess you've all got different backgrounds in the scene, and you could say different opinions and perspectives on what it is and what it means to build and foster a music-oriented community. So can you tell me what the term community means to you?
So from my perspective, I think a community is a body or a group of people that are able to uplift each other. I think a community should be based around uplifting other people within the community without any power dynamics. So like for example with Rap Party, we try and prioritise and uplift marginalised communities and make sure that their voices are heard within spaces, within nightclubs and the electronic music communities. I think that's what a community is to me.
Kitty?
Yeah, I mean, quite similar with Bloom. Like we originally started, I'd run it with a girl called Phoebe. We started it together, and we very much felt at the time there was like no one really. It was just very male dominated, and we wanted a space where we could come together as women and put on events and get more women into music and DJing. And then I started working with Percolate, which is like a very, very different brand. It's much bigger, a bit more commercial. Bloom like is very small. And then through working with Percolate, was able to do Risen, which is, I came from a very, not from DJing, from very, but working behind the scenes in music. And I feel like that's something that I really wanted to like be able to foster as part of Risen, and make sure people are aware that there are so many amazing people who work in the community of music that people just don't know about.
So do you think that there's a big difference between the meaning of community in a brand such as Percolate and then Bloom and Risen? Or
yeah, I think so. I think, you know, and it's interesting, I was having a conversation with Fred, who founded Percolate 9 years ago, and obviously with all the kind of changes in the market at the moment, and just with friends, Percolate used to have a community who would go to their events, like everyone they would go to, you know, you have like a Percolate card which would get you discounts and other like benefits, but now it's kind of become something a little bit bigger, and there's still a community there, but it's different. So yeah, I think having like a smaller scale or something that it's a bit more focused on a specific area, definitely. Like there is a big difference, and it's interesting working across like both spaces.
Sean?
Yeah, so I think pretty similar to what you both said. Community is definitely about bringing people together that have a shared interest, shared values, uplifting those people however you can, choosing your platform to do so. Keepush was kind of started to try and build a space where there was maybe a bit of a vacuum in London for like record stores closing, club spaces were closing down a lot at the time. And so yeah, we kind of wanted to replicate that sort of community aspect of dance music that was maybe lacking a little bit in the last like 5 years. And yeah, that's kind of it for me really.
And I guess you all in your respective kind of collectives have quite a big focus on fostering a safe space policy. And I was just wondering whether you'd come across any obstacles when trying to implement a safe space policy, or conversely kind of felt like it had been really well received and well respected by the clubbing community.
So I think for us, so like we're about to, for our third party, so we're like still very much in like the teething stages, but we've always had a safer spaces policy which we tried to implement at our three parties, which is what we started out with. But like for us, when we first began, I think it was quite difficult to integrate it into club space, especially with, you know, like security. Like one of our biggest things is like trying to create a safe space for trans people. So like we kind of faced an obstacle with that, with security not being as respectful as they could be, and honouring our safer space policy, and especially with the club space that we were at, a lot of the staff members weren't necessarily educated on that. So I think that's something that we're trying to push now more with our parties.
So do you think that coming up to your third party, that people are going to feel more safe and accepted than they would have done at your first? Like, do you think you kind of overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, I think that first party was definitely a learning curve for us in terms of, you know, implementing that safer spaces policy. And like from the very beginning, we've always said like our safer spaces policy is adaptable, and like we do like try and change it like very often. So I think like learning from that first party, I think definitely it will be a better experience for people like coming to our parties.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I work across like a number of very different events, from, you know, 300 capacity to like 12,000 capacity festivals, and it's something that for every event is a very different and difficult challenge to implement well. And for Bloom, for example, we have never actually had a safe space policy. It's something we've talked about and decided not to do it, because if you don't do it right, then I think it's just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it. And we decided that actually, so far in the 5 years that we've run Bloom, like nothing to our knowledge has ever gone wrong, or we've never had anyone come up to us feeling like they felt unsafe. Whereas I work with body movements as well, and you know, we really do a lot of work on the safe space policies, because it's supporting people across the queer community, but each community has a completely different set of needs that they need for their community, and it's how you then kind of in a festival where anyone can go into these venues, because it's a multi-venue festival in Hackney Wick. Anyone can go into these venues, but it's how do you then educate these people? And we've done a lot of work, as you were saying, with the venues, and some of them are incredible. All of their staff are really like want to learn, want to do everything. People will hire in a completely new security team who've been trained, whereas others are a little bit just like, yeah, okay, we get it. We'll put a poster on the wall. So I think it's just, you know, a lot. I've been finding recently that the more you have the conversations with people, the more people are starting to learn. And like we've all done training. A lot of our event staff that we get, we'll now go and do like a session with, I can't remember the name of the company who we do the training with, but we do a session with them before every one of our like multi-venue festivals. We try and get as many of the security who will be working on the day. Obviously that's really difficult because security is staffed quite last minute, and you know we've had issues in the past with security not treating people in the way that they should be, which have always been dealt with well, but you know it's a hard thing to really ever get right, and I think it's something that is always constantly evolving and you're always going to learn more about it.
Yeah. So Sean, do you think that implementing a safe space policy is kind of integral to the runnings of Keep Hush parties, or?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's something that we've really only started to grapple with in the last few years, especially as like the conversation around it started to become a lot more visible. We've done training with Good Night Out. I don't know if that's who you do it with, but
that is.
the other ones. To sort of craft a policy that we try and be as explicit as possible about in advance of our parties. All of our staff on something like our live streams where we have a camera crew who are like right there with DJs and in the crowd to like sort of look out for things. It's actually quite a weird challenge when you have a DJ in the middle of the crowd with no barriers. Some people can get really weird. And so we try and shut that down as quickly as possible and make sure that everyone's sort of equipped to do so. And then, like you both touched on, working with venues is one of the bigger challenges, I think, because we move around a lot of venues a lot of the time, different cities, different spots in London, and some of them will be really on it. Some of them will have done that training, they'll kind of know what you need out of a safe spaces policy, and others are just really oblivious. And it's so important to have, even if it's like 15 minutes, to just like introduce yourself to the security, get on a first name basis, really lay out like the ethos and values of what you're trying to achieve, and it can really help, you know, if something does go wrong.
So would you say that it's more on the staff working at the venue than it is kind of on the clubbers that are coming to the events? Do you think that they're accepting of the policies that you're implementing?
I think it works both ways. You know, venues have to be on their stuff, and then also like with Keep Hush, we cast quite a wide net musically, which attracts quite a wide range of like clubbers. You know, there'll be kids coming to their first ever party out of lockdown. They're 18, haven't really been in club spaces before, kind of treat it like a house party, don't really necessarily know how to behave and how to respect other people's space. And it's really important that we sort of use the platform to educate them on how, you know, how to conduct yourself, you know, and how to make sure everyone around you feels safe and can have a good time. But yeah, I guess there's just like an interplay constantly between people that work at venues, people that are coming through the doors, and the more everyone sort of understands how to make sure everyone is feeling safe and can enjoy themselves, like the better, really.
So in the aftermath of the pandemic, I guess there's kind of a point that, well, we've all been deprived of clubbing, partying, going out in general. Would you say that like the purpose of your parties have shifted, or like the identity of the parties have in any way?
So I think personally, like for me, because with Rap Party we kind of grew during lockdown, so that's where our identity kind of formed, and like the purpose of us throwing parties was to kind of create spaces for, you know, for people that like haven't had the chance to go clubbing, or like didn't have that kind of like outlet at the time. So I think like even more so now, it's about pushing that space forward, and ensuring that, you know, marginalised communities have that space, because there wasn't a lot of spaces for people like that before in general. So I think like even more so now, like our morals and values and ethos as a party is still at that level.
Yeah, I mean, so I started working for Percolate a month and a half before lockdown. So it's been a very interesting journey working with them, kind of going from being big parties across London every weekend to then lockdown, cancelling everything, reshuffling everything, and now coming back into this kind of like post-COVID market, which is very different. And I don't know if it's the same like up north, but in London, like a lot of bigger stuff are suffering. Like a lot of festivals this summer are suffering, some are cancelling at the moment, and because, you know, some of my bosses work across other festivals as well. I think that the whole shift of going out, as well as like the current recession that we're in, is really like having an impact. Like we've had a lot of events recently that should have been sold out or close to selling out, that are bigger shows with like, you know, big artists, and they're getting like 50-60% of what we would normally do. But then I go to a lot of smaller events that have maybe a bit more of a sense of community around them. Like there's a party that I love to go to, which is called Subsystem, which is a trance party, and every time I go, it's just like you see the same people there, the same, like it's always busy, but like a nice level of busy. And I think there's a real shift to people wanting to go to something that really has that community feel around it now. And also a lot of people just haven't experienced those people who would have been at uni in the last 2 years, who now haven't really gone out, kind of maybe just don't really like, you know, it takes you like, when you first go to uni, it takes you like a year, maybe a year and a half to kind of find the kind of scene that you want to be involved in, if that's what you want.
There's definitely a sense of that in Leeds, especially, I'd say.
Yeah, and then also like a lot of my friends, I'm almost 29 now, are now starting to realise that they can't go out as much as they used to, because they can't afford it, and be like, they're all working jobs, and they're just like, I can't be wrecked on a Monday anymore. And I think that also is having a bit of an impact. You know, there's still a solid crew of like party people who will always go out, but I think there is going to be a big change in like the next year or so. And I think what I think anyway is, I think there might be like a bit more of a rise of like free parties and kind of like more illegal, semi-legal, legal parties. I mean, obviously, I hope that doesn't happen, because that means I might not have a job. Yeah, well, it's just interesting, and I guess we'll just see how it goes over summer, and then into, I think, Q3 and Q4 this year will really be like a teller as to where the market's going to go, because obviously people are broke now. People are also saving up to go to festivals this summer that, you know, you've had tickets rolled over for like 3-4 years, and then the students will come back into any city once they've gone off for the summer. And I then think that would be a really interesting period of time to tell like where we're going to go.
Yeah. So, Sean, do you think kind of the identity of Keep Hush has changed since like over the pandemic, or are you just starting at where you left off?
Yeah, it definitely felt a bit like we got to start where we left off. We really changed tack during the pandemic and moved to, we created this service called Merch Service, where we were basically going to business with artists to do sort of like pre-order style merch campaigns to give them a revenue stream through the pandemic, and also ourselves, because we have a team that we had to support. And then Yeah, in terms of like the purpose of clubbing, it felt very much last summer like, you know, everything's back, it's exciting, it's like hedonistic again, we can all go out and like chill with each other. And then after that sort of bubble kind of wore out a few months in, we started to really feel this kind of pressure that Kitty's sort of been mentioning, where it almost feels like clubbing isn't the number 1 priority for a lot of people now. Like you said, people at the older end of the spectrum who are, you know, no, like we've all got friends who are like, yeah, people are like getting more serious in their relationships, they want to move out of London, they want to chill out a little bit more, and you have this sort of lost generation of kids that had to sit indoors for 2 years and never got to go out for the first time or see anything beyond like, yeah, the standard Freshers Week stuff. So we're definitely seeing that as like a bit of not an issue, it's just a changing habit in the market. But the community aspect definitely seems to be what people go for more. Like people don't seem as fussed about big headline DJs. And
yeah, I also think there's like the rise of like the social media and lockdown DJ, where, you know, loads of people have kind of become like Instagram famous, or like maybe not Instagram famous, but you know what I mean, like they've kind of like bubbled up over lockdown through streams and stuff, and then they want to go and put on like their own parties, like 400 to 300 cap, and then it's just not translating into people actually wanting to go to see them play, which is something that we've found quite a lot with a couple of people who we've been working with, and I wonder if that's just also a sign of the times that, like, you know, people are just like, I could just sit in at home and listen to their stream and not have to go out and not spend money.
Following on from Sean's point about kind of avoiding, or not avoiding, but not having headliners or co-headlining events, how did you find that went with kind of Risen and like?
Yeah, so Risen, I very much like wanted it to not be like based on like having headliners. I was like, over the last 2 years, I've listened to so many amazing people. Well, this also very much backtracks on what I just said, but I spent so much of my time just listening to like all of these incredible people, chatting to them like over lockdown, kind of like finding that like solace in music through the internet whilst we couldn't leave our homes. And when I got the go-ahead from my bosses that we could do Risen, I was like, I don't want to have headliners. I want it to be up and coming and support people who are so talented and are incredible at what they do, whether it's like musicians or event managers or, you know, the visual artists, the photographers we had. And it was, I like how well it was received, just like blew my mind. Like, I was never expecting it to kind of like get as much publicity and as much just like positive comments about it. And, you know, we're planning for I'm just starting planning for next year, and like I might have like a few more they're not headliners, but they're kind of like people like Paramida or not actually sure how you pronounce the name, but Sadefa DC, who don't live in the UK and they don't play all the time. You know, they're not like your Moxies and your Peach and your Searchers, who are incredible artists who I think should be showcased and get to play like in the UK more. And hopefully, you know, if it's a thing about cost, we can then look at like maybe doing a double up with someone in like up north or something. But just to get like a few people like that again, who maybe like run a label and have them do their label showcase, was also about getting the brands and crews all like involved and excited, and as much as a part of the process of building this like festival and community as it is just putting on like a festival for people. But the energy and like the vibe on the day was completely different to Queen's Yard Summer Party, which is like the same, is a multi-venue one which we do, well, Percolate's been doing for 6 years now, which we just had 2 weekends ago. And then Body Movements, which is the queer version, which is in July, which is run by Little Gay Brother, Boss Clayton and Saoirse. And yeah, I don't know, the energy at Risen was just like completely different from any of the other ones, and just like I'm still getting people messaging me being like, I still am thinking of this day, like is it happening again, like can we come back? So yeah, I feel like that's I can't remember what I was going to say, but yeah.
And Naomi, you have a similar kind of approach to Rap Party with the co-headliners, and is that right?
So we don't really like focus on headliners. So we obviously have us play at the parties, and then we just really get DJs that like we really vibe with, and who like we've seen out like play out before, not necessarily like the biggest DJs, but we also try and prioritize like up and coming DJs that we've seen about in Leeds, like whether that's they've been playing at bars or they've just started DJing. Like we always try and prioritize that, because I think like especially when we were coming up and like starting to DJ, like that would have been like so valuable to us. In terms of us getting out there, and we like want to provide that space for people to be able to, you know, play at their first party. So I think that's like one of the ways that we go about things.
Yeah, we had some people at Risen who'd never played out before, and it was just like incredible to see them like come and give them that space and opportunity to be part of something like bigger. And then it just like, you know, people then I've seen, and it's very made me annoyed, like, I've seen a number of new parties, like, start this year that just, like, are still booking just, like, straight white guys. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, there is actually no excuse for you to be doing this anymore. Like, there is so much talent, like, just look at that lineup. Like, you don't have to do much work. There's blogs, there's platforms, there's so much out there, just, like, give people that chance, give them their first set, you know, like you could actually change someone's life by doing that. And yeah, people should prioritize having people who aren't massive names, because actually sometimes I think if you're worried about tickets, book someone who's got a big crew of mates who'll be gassed to come and see them play.
Yeah. It's so valuable, honestly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess I'm just interested as to whether you think club spaces in general are changing, like from when you started out. Obviously you guys started out at different times, but like, do you think there's been a shift in kind of the behaviour and just general vibes of clubbers, like since you've started on your journeys?
Just like you mentioned this earlier, but obviously a lot of people now, like especially in Leeds, which is like a very unique city, haven't ever been out before, which is like a contrast to when, you know, I started going out and like the scene was very like saturated and a lot of people would go out and that was like the main thing. But like we've kind of noticed, especially when we've thrown our parties, that a lot of people are younger and don't necessarily know how to navigate spaces, don't necessarily know like club etiquette or anything about, you know, following safer spaces policies. So I think there's kind of been a shift in that sense.
Do you think that what you guys were saying, how it's often a lot more valuable to kind of book artists who aren't that well known or whatever, do you think that the fact that people haven't been going out as much could add to that, or they don't really know what parties they're going to or like who they're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like that's provides a space for people to explore, and like you said before, like booking someone with like a big friendship group and they come along, and like they can also discover other DJs that they've never heard before. So I think that's like a really valuable way.
Yeah, I think obviously you still there are certain events that you still need to book headliners, of course.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be the case if you're doing like, you know, big festivals, bigger club nights. You know, we do a lot of club nights at kind of 1,400 to 2,000 capacities, and like obviously you're not going to fill that out if you just have very small up and coming artists. Like you need to have like those bigger names. But then what I'm starting to try to do with Percolate for those events is then book a really interesting support lineup around it. And I don't know if you guys saw the Red Bull thing that they did a few years ago when they had the headliners warm up for the support acts, which I think was a really interesting concept. And I didn't manage to get down to any of them, and I wish I had. But I think they had like Snow from Manchester warming up for, who was it? Like John Hopkins warmed up for her or something, and it was just like, I know Mr. Scruff warmed up for her, and you know, just like changing things around and like mixing up definitely is like something that we have the ability to do now, whilst like everything's a little bit kind of like flipped on its head. Yeah,
I think maybe it almost relieves a bit of pressure in terms of programming. There's not this like need that you have to book X, Y, Z touring DJ all the time to sell your nights out. And there's so much talent coming through at the moment, which is kind of, it's weird because we've talked about there not being so many clubbers, but it seems like there's so many more people, more than ever, that are, you know, getting into DJing, wanting to like start a career in it, doing stuff like that. And there's such a big pool of talent to choose from. Like you said, like with Risen, like, I mean, that lineup was crazy. Like, so many people on there.
thanks.
But like, most of them are just like people that are just like, they're doing radio and like, they're just sort of putting in the hours, plugging away at it. And they deserve that recognition. And I think maybe now's a good time to start really promoting that.
No beef on the big headliners as well, you know, like they've worked hard for their craft, and like a lot of respect for them. But yeah, and it's interesting now, like when we book the bigger shows with headliners, I'm always like, I'd like to get a list of suggestions from you of people who you would like, if they're gonna, and unless they're doing all like long set, which is something that actually we've been finding people are kind of more interested in going to recently, because I think you get more out of the experience of seeing someone who is a headliner play like completely across the board all night. And you just like, it's more like going to a live gig, you know, where, you know, a band like really like puts a lot of effort and time and talent into making their music. And, you know, as a DJ, you are essentially just playing other people's music. Obviously, you know, you can do other bits and bobs and have effects and pedals and all of that kind of stuff. But I think, wow, I lose my train of thought so often, it's silly. I think that there's just a lot more, there is a lot more people who want to get into DJing and doing things, and it's incredible to see. And I hope that there is the capacity of clubbers to maintain the like, to be able to maintain it, and for us not to kind of go back into a world of lockdown, or not lockdown, but you know, when it gets to a point where promoters are promoting, but they're actually just doing it and running a loss, and they, you know, if a party's not full, the vibe isn't great, and like, then obviously people have a bad experience, they don't want to come back, and you know, you need to be able to make sure you're providing a great experience for people, because it is, people go out for like escapism and hedonism and to just kind of like get away from their reality of their day-to-day life. And if you can't keep doing that, and like if the clubs aren't getting full, they're not going to be able to maintain like paying their staff, paying their rent, paying for everything. You know, it's not an easy thing to own or run a club or to be a promoter if you're doing it full time. And obviously, you know, I don't think that there's a lot of people don't necessarily think about that when they go out. They just think, oh, I'll just go out for a night out. Nowadays, like, get a bit fucked up, go home, not think about it. but actually, you know, there's so much that goes into curating events, putting them on, making sure that people are safe at them, making sure people have a great time, and supporting, you know, artists, everyone.
Yeah. And I feel like recently, there's been an emergence in festivals that are kind of breaking the trend of the like saturated market of like dance music festivals. So we've got like Flesh Queer Festival, like the first LGBTQ plus electronic music and camping festival in the UK, I think. Then like Body Movements, which you mentioned, obviously Risen. Have you received any criticism for what you're doing?
Well, yes. But pretty much just from, I know I'm assuming, but from looking at these people's profiles, older white guys who are just like, this was never a thing back in the day, like, we don't need all, like, this is all a joke, blah, blah, blah. But mostly just on Facebook comments, like, I personally haven't received anything bad about it, and one of my bosses was a bit worried about that. He was like, they didn't have anything to do with the festival apart from being able to give me the space to do it. And he was like, what if we get backlash? And I was like, yeah, but whatever you do that is like breaking the mold in some way, is you're always going to receive criticism, and you just have to just kind of take it and just put it in the back closet somewhere. And there was one point where I was like, maybe we should do something with this. Like, some of the comments were ridiculous. And one of them was like, are they going to match their menstrual cycles to the BPM of the music or something? And me and Alice talked about it, and we were like, should we not? And then we were like, actually, if we do use this, then we're giving these people space, and actually we just want to not give them that space that legitimizes their comments. And yeah, there's always going to be haters on whatever you do, in whatever area of life you're in. And I think that's something that you just have to literally just be like, right, okay, fine, whatever.
Take it on the chin.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at them and it's just was like, well, it's actually quite funny. I mean, some of them literally just couldn't even like get the names right, like everything. Like, I was just like, well, if at least if you're going to take time out of your day to write a blog about something, at least get it right. Like, at least, you know. But yeah, there's always going to be a backlash, I think.
Naomi, have you received any criticism for what you're doing? Because like Leeds is probably a bit behind the times in terms of what you're like fostering.
Not to my knowledge. I don't think we've received any backlash. In fact, like, we've got quite a lot of support from people across Leeds. Like, I feel like the community here, like, is like, it's just amazing. Like, Leeds is like an amazing place. So yeah, we've never received any backlash, but we've kind of like looked at other people receiving backlash. Like, we've heard about Pussy Palace's backlash that they got. Like, it was quite big in the Daily Mail. It was just like, ridiculous. Yeah, I think no, we've not ever received any backlash for that.
I think it's safe to say, in all of your own ways, you're kind of shaking up the current power structures, which, as you mentioned, it had been very profit-centric, white, straight, male-dominated industry. Do you think we're kind of heading towards a new era in partying that basically just abolishes, well, doesn't abolish it, but we're basically heading into a new era that is more accepting?
I definitely think so. I think people are recognising like the need for spaces for people of marginalised communities, and recognising that promoters are recognising the fact that they need to hold themselves accountable for creating that space, and pushing and promoting, you know, the morals and values of the changing landscapes. I think it's definitely moving in that direction. I mean, there's obviously still parties out there that are very like heavily straight, white, cis, male dominated, but I think obviously people are recognising the need to move forward from that and progress.
Yeah, it's definitely on the right path, I think. Even looking back like 5, 6, 7 years, the scene was so different. Like people weren't even talking about this. I like found a bunch of flyers from my uni days in Nottingham the other day, and it was just like, just all blokes, every single party, and no one was even talking about it. And I think the work that like both of you are doing is really, really important. In festivals as well, I feel like it's quite conservative in its programming generally. Like financial risk is a lot higher. People don't want to take these risks and go out on a limb. So to really like go out and like put diversity and inclusion like front and center. Things like that, I think is going to do a world of good, and it will show that like you can have success without, you know, booking the same old undiverse male-dominated lineups that, you know, everyone sees every single year. So yeah, I think it's getting better. There's a lot more work to do still.
Yeah, same. I think when Phoebe and I started Bloom, like we started it because we both worked or ran other collectives in Manchester, and we did they joined together to do a bigger party called Mayday. And we were the only 2 girls, and we just got treated like shit by the guys who were involved in it. And we were just like, do you know what, this is absolute bullshit. Like, those events wouldn't have happened without me, and she was the best DJ out of the collective by far, and like they just wouldn't let her play. And since we started Bloom, like even in Manchester, obviously there was Meat Free beforehand and like a few others, but like the amount of collectives that have like popped up in Manchester who are now doing incredible things, and also just across the north in general, has been amazing. And then moving down to London, like obviously London is a completely different ball game in terms of everything to do with nights out and promoting, and you know, it has so many different pockets of, you know, like Dalston has like Dalston Superstore, which is just like an incredible place, supports like queer people from all backgrounds, and has been doing incredible work. I think they've been like 12, 15 years, maybe longer, and having the privilege to work with some of these people, and I've learned so much in the last few years through working with Percolate, and then doing body movements and helping Clayton with Little Gay Brother, and now Risen as well. And I think, yeah, there's definitely, we are moving in the right direction 100%, but there is still so much more work to be done. And I do think that, you know, like we do Waterworks as well, which is with Team Love, who do Love International and do a lot of stuff in Bristol, and having these conversations. And a lot of these are run by like older white guys, like they are now starting to really think about it, you know. And you look at the Houghton lineup for this year, like it's very white guys, but I also help on the Needs not-for-profit label, and Bobby, who helps program that, is like, yeah, I know, and I don't like it, and I want it to be more diverse, but they booked that lineup like 3.5 years ago because they had to cancel because of bad weather and then the pandemic twice. So they were like, there's not much we can do about it for this year, but you know, it's definitely something that is our top priority next year, is to like really kind of mix it up in their programming. And I'm like, I just knowing that these conversations are happening like behind the scenes is like really makes me think, yes, we are going to get there at some point. Like obviously there's always going to be, there's certain scenes as well, you know, like drum and bass or tech house, for example, where it's even harder as like a person of colour or a woman to break into those scenes, and they definitely have like a lot more work to be done, but there are people who are now like, yeah, this needs to change. And so I can't remember who it was, but I just saw the other day some quite big artists literally called out some of the promoters, just being like, it's not acceptable anymore, like you need to be doing better. And so even some artists now, like they have like diversity and inclusion on their rider, and they won't play parties if it's like all white guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing that, you know, like bigger artists are being like, no, we need to be supporting people from across all communities.
Yeah.
And actually standing up for people. And to the point where some of them are like, I will give them some of my fee. You know, because people, like, some people get paid ridiculous money, and that takes away from the amount that you can pay the support artists. And when you see an artist be like, no, I'd rather get these people to play, give them a bit more money, support them a bit more, it just really like makes you feel like, yes, there are some good eggs out there, and we need more of those good eggs to stand up and start really like pushing.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that. It definitely seems like we're moving in the right direction. Would you guys have any advice to anyone who's kind of starting their own collective, or I guess particularly those who have had potentially like really formative years taken away from them during the pandemic?
I mean, yeah.
I guess
I guess
you're
yeah.
a product of...
Yeah, I'm a product of lockdown. But I think the main piece of advice I'd probably give is transparency. Be like completely transparent about what you're doing every step of the way, and just be outward facing to the community, and make sure that, you know, you're inclusive of people that are within your community, and ensure that you're giving them that voice, because it's all, you know, said and done like throwing a party, but there's so many different elements that go into it that I think need to be considered.
Yeah, I think if you want to start a party now, you have no excuse to not be making it diverse in some way, and that even if you are all straight white guys doing the party together, that's fine, but, you know, make your bookings different. Make sure that you're looking into diversity and inclusion policies, safe space policies. Do some training, you know, learn how to deal with someone if they're having like an overdose or you know, a medical incident. If you're a young person who's just started to go out, learn about drugs, learn about, you know, there's so many good online sites now where you can really read up about drug taking and how to do it safely, because, you know, it's something that happens. And actually since the pandemic, I've noticed more and more people have taking too much and, you know, really getting themselves into bad situations. And luckily all of our staff are trained to be able to deal with these people, or get them at least to the medics. But make sure if you are having a party, I would always encourage to have someone who is medically trained there, especially if it's a party where you've got young kids coming through, because obviously they don't know.
Is that something that you weren't too clued up about when you started Bloom?
I mean, I've been going out for a very long time, and so I feel like I've known a bit more about that, but not like how to actually like deal with someone if they do have an overdose. And that's something that in the last few years, since we've kind of come out of the pandemic, I've really like, one of the first shows back had to deal with someone who overdosed on G, and it was very scary, and they were fine. But from that moment, I was like, I want to be like trained to know how to deal with these situations, because actually it's really scary, and the club doesn't want anyone to potentially die. You as the night, you know, look what happened when those people died at Fabric. You know, like the club almost got shut down, and we don't want any more reason for the local councils to be able to come and be like, right, no, that's it, because any opportunity they'll be there banging on the door waiting to close you down. And you know, the government don't want people going out partying, really. At the end of the day, like, I feel like the Tories just like, nah.
Yeah.
I mean, they love a party, but
Yeah, I mean, they love a party at Downing Street, you know, but not one that has, well, I mean, who knows what Boris Johnson might be into. But, yeah, I think that's an important aspect if you are starting out as a punter or running a night, to just get yourself clued up on every aspect of going out, and also how you spoke about earlier, how to interact with other people, and make sure you're respecting people's boundaries, because obviously you have no idea if someone might have like a phobia of someone touching them on the head that could send them into like a downward spiral, or and just making sure that you are just nice to people.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've gone out and people are just dickheads, and I'm like, but why? We're all here for the same reason. Like, we're all here, well, mostly here because we like the music and we want to have a nice time. And if you're going to be a dickhead, I'm just going to leave because it's not nice.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you guys covered a lot of what I was probably going to say. But I think also, yeah, just like go out and explore your like scene, find the people you want to serve, like find like-minded people, figure out why you want to start a night or a collective, or have some sort of, not necessarily a mission, but like find a niche to fill. And then I think, especially as like habits of clubs are changing, people are really resonating with that sort of thing. I think it's pretty important to find your community, and just keep going out, go and support other people's parties, all that.
Yeah, for sure. And finally, would you guys have any kind of advice to your younger selves? If you were starting out on your careers again, would you do anything differently?
No. I never anticipated ending up like working where I am now. When we first kind of started doing Bloom, I was like, I'd love to be a club booker, but I never anticipated it happening, and I worked loads of random jobs in between, which I was just like, I don't like doing this. And I was very lucky that I got approached by Percolate, and for me it's a bit of a like, I can't believe this is what I do now moment, but I worked really hard to get myself to a point where someone recommended me, and if you want to do it, just go ask people's advice as well, like there's so many people in the industry who, if you just hit them up on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, people are always happy to just go and have a coffee with you or a chat with you and be like, if you want to do it, these are some ways, these are some places, this is how I went about it. Maybe, it might not necessarily be the right way for them, but, just speak to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was kind of the same, really. I didn't plan to get into this at all, really. It was always something I did. I used to run nights at uni, stuff like that, similar to yourself, and then just sort of moved to London and sort of managed to get really lucky and find myself working with Keep Hush. To be honest, just doing what you did. To be honest, I was just like sort of knew the guys around it. I was like, can I come like chill out one day a week? and sort of never left. So yeah, meet as many people as you can, and just build the network, because ultimately the network of people that you meet is going to be more valuable than any sort of experience, I think, when you're starting out. Yeah,
a great way to get into it is like doing door shifts, working like, just kind of working in nights, if there's a collective you really like, message them being like, can I come do some door shifts for you? Because, that's how we've, for Bloom, that's how we've expanded. So there's now like 5 or 6 of us in the collective where, and it's not always been the same people in the collective. We've changed, and I think it's nice that like we're constantly evolving and changing, and people come and then they leave when they feel like they've got what they've needed out of it, or that they just don't want to be doing this anymore, and that's completely fine. But you know, some of the people now we have in Bloom are amazing, and they got into it because they would always come and do the door for us if we needed someone to do the door. And you know, it's a great way to be able to like meet the promoters of the night, or like go and introduce yourself to the club owners or the bar managers, and then they get jobs on the bar, and then through that you kind of like can progress through. And I think that's a really probably one of the easiest ways to get into music, if that's what you want to do, unless you want to go into like AR or label stuff, then I have no idea about that really. But from a like putting on from a working at events and like working at parties perspective, I'd say that's a like great way to kind of get yourself out there.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys both just said. But if I was gonna give a piece of advice to my younger self, I'd probably say know your worth. Because, you know, like when I first started DJing, I was just getting excited at, you know, the opportunity to play at any gig and being offered like 50 quid for an hour, and I was happy with that. But it's about knowing, you know, your value and knowing that you've actually got talent and believing in yourself. So I think, yeah, I'd definitely give that piece of advice to other people starting out.
Cool. Well, Naomi, Kitty, and Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is these off?